Hello everyone, my name is Battlesy. Today we're talking about the 5.03 Age of Reckoning hotfixes that have happened for the Dwarves specifically. I was one of the creators that provided a lot of feedback in relation to the mechanics, and I'm happy to see some really quick changes have happened. A lot of the feedback I've received from some of the community members is that they wanted to wait to play the Dwarves until they were perfect. This video is going to describe, are they perfect? Well, to me, as somebody that's played the Dwarves since Warhammer 1, they were always perfect. Do not shame your ancestors. But for the generalized public and people like yourselves playing the game, let me break down exactly what's changed, my thoughts on it. Let's jump into it. So firstly, to mention about the kind of the vision CA has for it, you shouldn't be able to easily max out every cycle. And that, to me, makes perfect sense, and I don't think it should be a realistic thing where you can 100% it every single time. I mean, the Dwarves, typically speaking, they have about a bazillion grudges constantly, so for them to always sustain the grudges is pretty unrealistic, right? They're constantly on the warpath and constantly trying to write the book, get rid of the entries within the book. I mean, Scarstick's a whole new kettle of fish, because obviously he has one of the largest amounts of records in a book of grudges, but still. What they've done is they've made adjustments to the Grudge settler units and army rewards granted by the Age of Reckoning to soothe out its impact on the early and late game. Interesting change, but one of the biggest things for me is that the Grudge targets are now defined based on the factions you share a land border with, rather than all net factions. And what does that mean? It's a good question. So, as you can see, what I've done is I've taken the Fog of War off of my game here with this console command mod, and you can see that all we have from a grudges perspective is they've been very much minimized. So we have a lot less grudges that are needed in the early stages of the game, and just in general per cycle of the Age of Reckoning. This has been scaled down pretty dramatically. I think it's probably been about half to maybe about a third of what you normally would get from a grudges. And I could also go ahead and see and look over towards where Wurzag is. You can see over here there's a lot of grudges that are being incurred as part of them being greenskins. And what that meant previously is if I had these guys sharing lands or being somebody that I've met, so I've declared war on them, or have an ally that, like, let's say these are my ally, obviously, do not shame your ancestors. We don't want to be with Groby, but we had visibility of them. That would then scale up how many grudges I would need. As of right now, it's only on the border of your lands, which is a great change, which means that, you aren't punished for doing quest battles. So let's say I have any quest battles that make me teleport to the Empire, specifically as Grombrindle over here. No longer are you going to get an insane amount of grudges as part of Vlad existing. It's not going to punish you for doing quest battles and playing the game normally, which is one of the biggest concerns that I had when I was playing the Dwarves. It was like, I felt awful that I am being significantly punished for existing. So what does that now mean for your expansion? In Belagar's case, as part of trying to go towards the Katakay Peaks for, getting rid of the debuffs that he has, it is your incentive to do so. If I were to start moving towards, let's say, the Western Badlands, I would now start sharing a lot of settlements as part of this, and the grudges would start stacking up for Wurzag, and it would start stacking up for Scabii and whoever also was within the lands here. Ignore the alliance here, I did it as a tester. I would start getting a significant amount of grudges building up as part of taking settlements around this area, but it's not an unrealistic ask of me to do that. Mainly because of the fact that if I'm in that area, I have an incentive to continuously attack and get the province under my own leadership. So it makes perfect sense that as part of expanding, you will have to develop grudges around the area and you'll have to deal with them accordingly. Whereas beforehand, you were sort of forced to play like Khorne, where you literally just had to rush at everything, not care about whatever was happening, and just try your best to continuously get grudges. Obviously, on one of the videos that I made about it, Age of Reckoning mechanic is flawed. I agree. I honestly did believe that when I released that video, because there are certain scenarios where you as the player can quite literally do nothing wrong and then get nowhere near anything remotely close to any type of reward, which now leads us perfectly into the reward brackets. So you can see now the second reward bracket does not provide any amount of growth debuffs or any kind of growth debuffs or control debuffs, and only the first one now does. So the 0 to 24%, the growth debuff has actually been taken down from 25 as well, which is nice. So it's now to 15, which means that if I take a new settlement, I won't be heavily punished. So you can see that the new settlement is 10 growth and a growth building is 20. In the previous iteration, you pretty much would nullify completely a brand new settlement that you would create, and so it would take a significant amount of time to gain a population surplus, because as you can see, you need 125, which is kind of crazy. And to put that into perspective, it would take 25 turns to get the relevant amount of growth required with the previous iterations of the debuff of minus 25 growth for all provinces. So imagine you've taken a completely new settlement and you have to wait 25 turns and you've put a growth building in there to get a population surplus until you start taking more of that territory. That is just really brutal because it's one of the biggest weak points of the dwarfs is that they have terrible growth as is. And you're already punishing them because it shifts you kind of into a certain situation where you're being punished just for existing. And that's one of the biggest criticisms I had of the previous iteration of Age of Reckoning, where just for playing the game, I was significantly punished. Here, it's massively, way better now that it's minus 15 instead of minus 25. And obviously you have the neutral zone between 25 and 49%. And to start transitioning over towards, trying to get the amount of grudges that you needed, a lot of the time, realistically, you couldn't get to the level of grudges that you needed as part of the Age of Reckoning mechanic, and so it felt equally as bad. You need to expand as part of the mechanic for the grudges, but you're also punished for expanding sometimes because you just can't get enough grudges. But moving on to the next one. So the next point within the hotfix that I've released is that the turn timer is now 15 turns. So instead of it being a 10-turn timer, they've now made it 15 turns. So a lot of the complaints I was seeing a lot of the time was, I don't want to play the dwarves like corn. I want to build tall. And now with a 15-turn timer and the neutral zone between 25 and 49% without providing any debuffs, realistically, that is something you can do. The game is a sandbox experience. You should be able to play it however you wish. And I'm very happy to see that has been changed. And I quite like the fact that it's now 15 turns. Obviously, over a longer period of time, we get significantly less rewards from it. So, for example, over 150 turns, we get 5 less Age of Reckoning rewards, which sounds like quite a lot. But typically speaking, I don't really play campaigns until very, very late into it. Turn 50, turn 70, I'm donezo. I've already done everything I wanted to do. Maybe that's just me. Maybe you guys are similar. Let me know down below. But yeah, really good change in that they've slowed down the pace of the Age of Reckoning to allow people to have the time to make the right decisions specifically for them in the campaign. And now next up, the grudges are scaling differently per the campaign difficulty. And also what they have done is they have squished the amount of grudges in the world along with how many grudges are gained by hostile actions. So as you can see, like we mentioned, the amount of grudges I require is 1,120. Which is probably about a third of what I wanted to get previously. It might be about 2,600, so it's less than half of what I needed previously as part of the squish that has gone on. So that is a really significant change. I'm getting a lot less grudges here, but already from the very, very beginning, in let's say attack this, take this, confederate these guys, take this on turn 4. I've already done half of my grudges, which is quite a lot, honestly. Then that means I need to go towards Scrag. It seems they've actually scaled the amount of grudges Scrag gives as well, because in the previous iteration, you'd get about this much for Scrag. So they've clearly, ogre actions and faction actions, they've clearly scaled the amount of grudges that certain factions will give, which is really good because I often was annoyed that going towards Scrag as belly guy, you kind of punished for it because you weren't getting a lot of the grudges. So my thoughts on this campaign scaling, I think I'd have to test it a little bit more, but I think overall it doesn't make too much sense to scale it with difficulty. Are you indicating that on easy difficulty it's a lot easier to get it? I guess that makes sense. On legendary, though, just the way the AI works, they'll run at you and fight you loads, so honestly, what will probably end up happening is being in legendary difficulty will be easier than easy. Unintentionally, just the way that the AI functions and works. So, things like that. Changes to campaign difficulty changes specifically mean very little usually because on Legendary, just weird things happen anyway. And the squishing is something I quite like, and they mentioned that it'll be less dramatic. So one thing that you used to be able to do is you would expand really rapidly, and then, let's say I owned Barak Var, and Spite Backbiter took Barak Var away from me. That would be the greatest way of me to try and farm grudges, was to let them take your own settlements. So you want to be a bit of a masturbator here and let them take your settlements and then just attack them straight away and take it back, because it scaled the grudges insanely. Like, this guy could have gone from 62 to 1,000, and that would have given you early game, like 30, 40%. So it was often worth actually giving your settlements up. So yeah, that's sort of fair enough there. I actually quite like the way they've scaled it, but my only worry is, as part of squishing it, as part of changing a lot of the Age of Reckoning, my thoughts right now before testing it too much and what I can see here, it may be too easy, especially over 15 turns. Your vision is to not let you do 100% every time, but we'll play test this one a little bit as well and just see how it performs and see what it's like. One of the next changes to mention is that they have reduced the amount of grudges required to confederate by half. But one thing I do want to still mention that currently exists is if you are confederating minor factions, as, like, let's say Thoric, Belagar, any opportunity you can confederate a minor settlement, a minor dwarf faction, it still doubles. So be wary of this one. Obviously, you want to keep in mind that if you are confederating anything, it will increase by 7,500 every time. And honestly, with the changes, it is not worth to confederate the minor dwarven factions most of the time. Otherwise, you're going to be pretty significantly punished for it. Next up, you can see the Darklands and the Dwarfs in general have had a lot of grudges added onto them. So, as part of coming towards this area, you can get yourself quite a hefty amount of grudges. As you can see, the Gorth are cruel, and everybody around here is giving a really, really good amount of grudges here. So, yeah, interesting and nice to see that they scale up nicely. So, yeah, just one thing to note as part of the changes. And another one to mention, you no longer can sack and then loot and occupy, as previously you could get double the amount of grudges rewarded from doing that. So, definitely a good fix by CA there. One thing I wanted to mention, I was able to 100% the Age of Reckoning really easily, even though my previous runs before the changes, I struggled to get to 100% on Belagar. Now my only issue with it being expanded to 15 turns, for 7 turns now I am de-incentivized, from attacking settlements. Like, I know Iron Rock and Karagron has some Skaven in it, although please report to your local witch hunter if you think they're real. For 7 turns, I'm going to be sitting here, twiddling my thumbs, sitting on my hands, because I don't really want to attack anything else, because it feels a bit of a waste. I would love the Age of Reckoning to have a carryover mechanic to the next Age of Reckoning, but yeah, just thought I want to mention that. So a huge change in regards to the Age of Reckoning Grudge Settler army. It spawns at your Legendary Lord now. Love to see that. I'm so happy that's the case, because it didn't make sense it spawned at your capital. Now you can actually leverage the facts and the momentum you gain from the army correctly where your Legendary Lord is. Obviously, there's use cases where it's a bit annoying, because previously, in the scenario, if it spawned at my capital, I could defend against this random army, because the Skaven are very treacherous. But we can see here that the army size is reduced by 5, but that's specific to the fact that within the actual tech tree itself, you can then reclaim that again. Objective there, I'm assuming, is to reduce your early game power and make it sure that in the mid to late game, you can then gain that power back, because I think 15 units was a bit excessive, but you can see the units that I'm gaining are pretty damn strong in general anyway. And also the range of the flame cannons have been increased by 40, which is also a big dub. Love to see that. But overall, let's go through the changes. So we now know that the grudge throwers now actually require cost to recruit them. The maximum capacity for them has been reduced from 20 to 2, which is a significant nerf. But overall, I think it makes sense, because they've basically taken away the power in the early game and put it into the mid to late game. So yeah, really nice changes. I don't mind that at all. But yeah, overall, basically through various tech trees and various skills now, you can retain or regain the amount of strength that you once had. But yeah, love the fact that it spawns at your lord. But yeah, that was a really, really large overview. I also want to mention that there's been some changes in regards to the dwarves units. One thing I do want to say is the grape shot has been nerfed. Basically, in the game code, it had a 0.3 for the grape shots of accuracy for the Empire, and it was 3 for the dwarves, so I think they have nerfed them quite a lot. So keep that in mind. Another thing to mention as well, the gyrocopters have been buffed, and honestly, which is a really, really interesting change. I would honestly recommend everybody to recruit gyrocopters as much as you can, because they're going to be absolutely bonkers, and they will take over the game in your early game. Use them every single time for your early game. But the answer is, are the dwarves perfect now? That's what we asked ourselves at the very beginning of the video, and I say this is a definite, significant improvement. The experience is a lot less jarring for the player overall regarding Age of Reckoning. You no longer are punished in the 25 to 49%. So yeah, great change there. Age of Reckoning spawning on the Legendary Lord, huge, love that. Yeah, overall the dwarves have definitely been made better here. For me, they're perfect, but obviously everyone's different. So if you haven't given the dwarves a try because of the Age of Reckoning, I would highly recommend it now. Thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves.